How an ordinary car mechanic who never even dreamed of the NBA managed to become a man feared by the league's best players. Why were scouts certain he would never achieve success? And what accidental event completely changed his life? Be sure to watch this video to the end. In the finale, a lesser-known fact about Mark Eaton awaits you, showing just how incredible his journey was. And you will also learn why the story of one of the greatest defenders in NBA history ended so unexpectedly that it shook the entire basketball world. Today, the name Mark Eaton is forever inscribed in the history of the National Basketball Association. He is considered one of the best defensive specialists in the entire history of the league. He was twice named the NBA Defensive Player of the Year, 4 times became the NBA blocks leader, and for many years held the record for the average number of blocks per game, which many experts called practically unattainable. But the most surprising thing is something entirely different. Most future stars begin preparing for a professional career in childhood. They spend thousands of hours in sports gyms, play for school teams, receive invitations from the country's top universities, and from an early age are under the close attention of coaches and scouts. With Mark Eaton, everything was completely different. When many of his future opponents were already considered rising talents of American basketball, Eaton himself was spending his days in an ordinary auto repair shop. Instead of training, he dismantled engines, repaired cars, and was sure that this is exactly what he would be doing for the rest of his life. Professional sports seemed like something very distant and practically unattainable. Back then, no one could imagine that a few years later, this tall and calm guy would become a real nightmare for the best centers in the NBA.
No one could assume that his name would end up alongside the greatest masters of defense, and thousands of fans would greet his appearance on the court louder than the arrival of many superstars. But fate prepared a completely different scenario for him. Before becoming the symbol of the Utah Jazz defense and one of the most respected players of his generation, Mark had to go through a path that was unlike almost any other success story in NBA history. And it all began long before crowded arenas, television broadcasts, and the ovations of a multi-thousand crowd. It was then that the life of the young car mechanic unexpectedly made a turn that changed his future forever. Mark Eaton was born on January 24, 1957, in Inglewood, California. Even in childhood, he stood out significantly from his peers. His height increased so fast that people around him constantly paid attention to him.
For any other boy, such physical data could become a ticket to big sports. But in Mark's case, everything turned out to be much more complicated. Tall height brought not only advantages, but also constant discomfort. He felt clumsy, moved slower than his peers, and did not look like a future basketball star at all. Coordination left much to be desired, and self-confidence was practically absent. In his school years, Eaton occasionally stepped onto the basketball court, but his performances did not make much impression on either coaches or specialists. No one saw him as a player capable of ending up in the NBA one day. After graduation, life followed a completely ordinary scenario. Instead of university arenas and loud sports victories, Mark chose the profession of a car mechanic. He got a job at a repair shop where he spent long hours fixing cars. Every new day was like the previous one. Engines, tools, the smell of machine oil, and constant physical labor gradually became his familiar reality. At this time, professional basketball existed somewhere very far away. While future stars of his generation played for the strongest university teams, participated in prestigious tournaments, and attracted the attention of NBA scouts, Mark didn't even think he would ever end up next to them. It seemed that his life had already taken its final shape, and changing anything was too late. At the same time, nature continued to do its job. Eaton's height reached an impressive 224 centimeters. People literally stopped on the street to look at him. Strangers constantly asked the same question, "Do you play basketball?" Over time, he got used to hearing it almost every day. However, Mark himself only calmly answered that he worked as a car mechanic. Such an answer usually caused sincere surprise. Later, he admitted more than once that he didn't feel like a person with unique opportunities at all. On the contrary, it seemed to him that the train had already left. He didn't have serious basketball training, had no experience playing at a high level, and clearly understood how far behind he was compared to those who dedicated their entire childhood to the game. Many in his place would have finally forgotten about sports. The job provided a stable income, life was understandable and predictable, and dreams of big basketball looked too unrealistic. But right at the moment when it seemed that Mark's fate was already determined, an event happened that was impossible to predict. One accidental meeting made him seriously think for the first time that, perhaps, his real story hadn't even started yet. This meeting happened completely unexpectedly. One day, Cypress College instructor Tom Howell paid attention to Mark.
Seeing a young man over 2 meters and 20 centimeters tall, he asked him that very same question Eaton had heard so many times. Why don't you play basketball? Usually, Mark just brushed it off, but this time, the conversation turned out to be much more serious. Howell didn't try to convince him that he was already ready for the professional level. On the contrary, he understood how raw this tall guy was, but he saw what others missed. Unique physical data that with proper work could turn into a huge advantage. He suggested Mark try himself at college and at least give basketball one more chance. For Eaton, this decision was not easy. He was already 21 years old, an age when most future NBA players either had long been playing for strong university teams or were already preparing for the draft. He understood that he was far behind in almost everything: technique, understanding the game, movement on the court, and physical preparation specifically for basketball. Yet, he agreed. The first training sessions turned out to be much harder than he expected. Huge height didn't guarantee anything by itself. Mark literally had to learn how to move on the court all over again. Simple exercises that came automatically to other players required huge concentration from him. Sometimes it seemed that his body simply didn't have time to execute commands as fast as the game required. Many coaches in his place could have quickly lost patience. Basketball players with this level of preparation rarely even reached a serious collegiate level. However, Eaton possessed a quality that all his mentors repeatedly noted later: incredible hard work. He never complained or made excuses. If he had to stay after practice for another hour, he stayed. If he needed to repeat the exact same movement dozens of times, he kept working until it started working out. Gradually, changes became noticeable to those around him. He felt the court better, acted more confidently near the basket, and began to understand how to use his main advantage: fantastic height and wingspan. Instead of trying to play like faster and more technical basketball players, Mark began building his own style. His task was not to score dozens of points, but to turn the space under the basket into a forbidden territory for opponents. It was then that specialists from the University of California, Los Angeles, the legendary UCLA, decided to give him a chance. For Mark, this was a huge step forward. The university that nurtured many future NBA stars opened doors for him that he hadn't even dared to dream about just recently. However, new trials awaited him ahead. Even finding himself in one of the strongest basketball universities in the country, Eaton still remained a person who most experts did not consider a future NBA player.
And when draft time came, there were far more doubts surrounding his candidacy than those who truly believed in his success. When the 1982 NBA draft arrived, Mark Eaton was not considered one of the most promising young players. On the contrary, most specialists treated him extremely cautiously. They saw his giant height, but at the same time noticed everything he still lacked. He came to basketball late, didn't possess a bright attacking game, and didn't look like a person around whom a team's future could be built. That is exactly why his name was not called in the early picks of the draft. Only in the 4th round, with the 72nd overall pick, was Mark selected by the Utah Jazz. For many, this decision passed almost unnoticed. In those years, the 4th round rarely gave the league future stars, and players chosen so late were often forgotten before the season even started. But the Utah Jazz management saw something in Eaton that others failed to discern.
The club understood they were not getting a ready-made basketball player. They were getting a project that required time, patience, and a huge amount of work. It was a risk, but a risk that fully paid off in the future. The first months in the NBA turned out to be incredibly difficult. The speed of the game here was completely different. Everything happened faster, harder, and much more demanding. Every evening, experienced centers came out against Mark, many of whom were already considered league stars. Any mistake instantly turned into easy points for the opponent. In attack, Eaton felt unconfident. His technical arsenal was very limited, and fighting against more experienced players was hard. Sometimes it seemed the critics were right when they doubted his prospects. But Mark himself never tried to become a universal player. Instead, he focused on what he could actually do better than others. He began to turn defense into his main weapon.
The Utah Jazz coaches quickly realized that near their own basket, Eaton was capable of changing the course of the game. His huge height, wingspan, and amazing sense of timing allowed him to block attack directions. Basketball players more and more often changed decisions in mid-air upon noticing Mark's figure in front of them. Some preferred to refuse the shot altogether, just not to collide with his long arms. Gradually, the coaching staff's trust grew as well. If at the beginning of his career he spent a limited amount of time on the court, with each passing month he received more playing minutes. Eaton learned to read opponents' actions, choose the right position, and use his physical data as efficiently as possible. All this happened not thanks to natural talent, but thanks to daily work that fans rarely saw. Very soon, it became obvious that the Utah Jazz had found a player of a completely special type.
Perhaps he would never become the team's main scorer, but he could do what almost no one else in the league managed. While other centers dreamed of bright attacking moments, Mark gradually turned into a person capable of changing the defense philosophy of the entire team single-handedly. And it was then that what changed his career forever began. From a little-known player chosen only in the 4th round of the draft, he was rapidly turning into a basketball player whom the best attacking players in the NBA would soon start fearing. What happened next came as a real surprise to the entire league. Already in his 2nd season, it became clear the Utah Jazz had found not just a tall center, but a person capable of completely changing the game on defense. Mark ceased to be a player perceived as a curious experiment. Now his name was increasingly heard among the best defenders in the NBA.
With each match, he controlled the space under the basket more confidently, and opponents began to understand that getting through him would be incredibly difficult. In the 1984 to 1985 season, Eaton made a real breakthrough. He averaged 5.6 blocks per game, a figure that still remains an NBA record for a full season. For comparison, even the best modern block specialists rarely approach such numbers. It seemed that a real impassable wall had grown near the Utah Jazz basket. But statistics reflected far from everything. Many opponent attacks ended without a shot at all. Basketball players entered the 3-second zone, noticed Mark in front of them, and changed their decision at the last moment. Some hastily passed the ball to a partner. Others tried to retreat back to the perimeter, and others simply refused the drive. Even if Eaton didn't touch the ball, his presence already changed the course of the episode. That is exactly what coaches appreciated him for.
He forced opponents to play differently than they planned. Huge height, impressive wingspan, and a great sense of position turned the Utah Jazz defense into one of the most reliable in the league. In the same season, Mark received the NBA Defensive Player of the Year award for the first time. For a person who was repairing cars just a few years earlier and practically had no serious basketball experience, this looked almost incredible. He proved that hard work and discipline are capable of leading to the top, even when no one believes in you. Yet, he wasn't going to stop. A few years later, Eaton became the best defensive player of the season again, confirming that his success was no accident. 4 times he finished the championship as the NBA leader in total block shots and was repeatedly included in the symbolic teams of the best defensive players. Every new season only strengthened his reputation as one of the most uncomfortable centers for any opponent. At the same time, Mark never strived to become the main hero of attacks. He understood his role perfectly and didn't try to change his own style for the sake of beautiful statistics. While others fought for top scorer titles, he focused on preventing others from scoring. It was this self-sacrifice that made him indispensable for the Utah Jazz. Fans quickly grew to love their giant. They knew that every blocked shot was capable of inspiring the team no less than a spectacular dunk. The home arena literally exploded with emotions whenever another opponent's attempt ended in a meeting with Eaton's long arms. By the mid-1980s, no one remembered anymore that Mark was once considered a late-blooming player without serious prospects. Now he was respected across the league. Even the most prolific basketball players admitted that attacking the basket when Eaton was underneath it was one of the most difficult tasks in the NBA. However, outside the court, Mark remained a completely different person. Unlike many stars of that time, he never strived to be in the center of loud stories. It was this trait that made him special not only for teammates, but also for thousands of fans who saw much more in him than just an outstanding defender. Despite growing popularity and numerous individual awards, Mark Eaton practically didn't change. While many NBA stars got used to constant press attention and enjoyed celebrity status, he remained calm, modest, and surprisingly simple in communication. That is why respect for him was huge, not only among Utah Jazz fans, but also among players throughout the league. Teammates often said that behind the impressive build hid a person with a kind character and great sense of humor. On the court, he looked like a real fortress, but outside of it, he was always ready to support young players, help with advice, or simply lift spirits in the locker room. For many rookies, Mark became the person to turn to in the most difficult moments. His role became especially important in the second half of the 1980s when the Utah Jazz turned into one of the strongest clubs in the Western Conference. 2 future Hall of Famers came to the team, Karl Malone and John Stockton. Their bright game gradually brought the club to a new level, but reliable defense, largely provided by Eaton, remained the foundation of success. While Stockton distributed his famous assists and Malone scored points, Mark did work that far from always made newspaper headlines. He ensured partners, won fights under his own basket, forced opponents to change tactics, and created a sense of confidence for the whole team. Utah Jazz players knew that if a defender made a mistake, there was a person behind his back capable of fixing the situation. Coaches appreciated Eaton not only for blocks.
He chose positions brilliantly, managed the defense competently, and constantly prompted partners, helping them properly rebuild during opponent attacks. These qualities are rarely reflected in statistics, but it is they that make team defense truly strong. Equally telling was the attitude of fans. In Utah, Mark became a real favorite of the public. He was appreciated not for loud statements and spectacular actions, but for honest work and full dedication in every match. He never played for the sake of beautiful numbers. His main task was always the team's victory, even if it meant sacrificing his own statistics. During 12 seasons with the Utah Jazz, Eaton never changed clubs once. For the modern NBA, such loyalty looks like a rare thing, but for Mark, it was completely natural. He sincerely considered Salt Lake City his home, and the Jazz organization his second family. Fans responded in kind, perceiving the tall center as one of the main symbols of the club. Over the years, age and constant physical loads made themselves felt more and more. Each season required more effort, and the fight under the basket became heavier. Mark understood perfectly that even the most successful sports career eventually comes to an end. In the early 1990s, this moment gradually began to approach, and a completely new chapter of life awaited him ahead. One without daily matches, crowded arenas, and constant struggle for victory. After the 1992 to 1993 season, Mark Eaton made the decision to end his professional career. Over 12 years with the Utah Jazz, he played more than 800 matches, was twice recognized as the NBA Defensive Player of the Year, 4 times became the league blocks leader, and forever entered the club's history as one of the greatest defensive players. For many athletes, the end of a career becomes a hard test, but Mark decided not to distance himself from the people and the city that became part of his life. He stayed living in Utah and continued actively participating in the life of the local community. Basketball still occupied an important place, but now Eaton tried to pass his experience on to others. He regularly appeared at Utah Jazz events, met with fans, supported charitable projects, and gladly communicated with young players who grew up watching his matches. Soon, Mark found himself in another sphere as well. Using his many years of experience communicating with teams and leaders, he became a motivational speaker. Large companies, universities, and various organizations invited him. Instead of talking only about sports achievements, he spoke about discipline, teamwork, leadership, and the ability to use opportunities that sometimes appear completely unexpectedly. Eaton recalled his own youth particularly often. He didn't hide that his path was completely unlike the stories of most NBA stars.
On the contrary, Mark spoke openly that for a long time, he didn't see himself as a professional athlete at all. That is why he urged young people never to cross out their dreams just because they started later than others. His own life was the best proof of these words. Despite the passing years, the connection with the Utah Jazz only grew stronger. Fans continued to meet him with huge respect, and the club regularly invited the former center to various events. When Mark appeared at the home arena, the public invariably greeted him standing. For several generations of Jazz fans, he forever remained the person who defended the team's basket better than anyone else for many years. Over time, his authority went far beyond basketball. Many noted that Eaton was able to talk equally easily with heads of large companies and ordinary fans. He lacked the arrogance that famous athletes sometimes develop.
Even decades after ending his career, he willingly took pictures with fans, answered questions, and never refused a short conversation. It seemed that many years of calm and saturated life awaited Mark ahead. He remained active, regularly played sports, participated in public projects, and continued to inspire people with his example. No different from many previous ones, no one could assume that one ordinary trip would very soon become the cause of news that would deeply shock not only the residents of Utah, but the entire basketball world. On May 28, 2021, seemed like the most ordinary day. Mark Eaton, who was 64 years old, went for a bike ride along a familiar route near his home in Summit County, Utah. He had long loved an active lifestyle and regularly made such trips. Nothing foretold that this particular day would forever enter basketball history. During the ride, an accident occurred.
According to local authorities, Mark lost control of his bicycle on a road section and received heavy injuries. Eyewitnesses immediately called emergency services, and he was promptly delivered to the hospital. Doctors did everything possible, but the consequences turned out to be too serious. Soon, the basketball world learned news that many found hard to believe. The news spread across the U.S. with incredible speed. For several generations of Utah Jazz fans, Mark Eaton was not just a former player, he had long become a symbol of the club, a person known by almost all residents of the state of Utah. Therefore, words about what happened caused sincere shock far beyond basketball arenas. Words of support from NBA players, coaches, and club management began appearing almost immediately. The Utah Jazz published an emotional statement calling Mark a true legend of the organization and a person who made a huge impact not only on the team, but on the entire state community. Club representatives recalled his kindness, openness, and readiness to always come to help. Many former partners admitted they lost not just a teammate, but a close friend. John Stockton and Karl Malone repeatedly spoke about how important a role Eaton played in Jazz successes. For them, he was the person who never strived to be in the center of attention, but daily made a huge contribution to the common cause. Fans didn't stay away either. People brought flowers, photographs, game jerseys with number 53, and memorable souvenirs to the Utah Jazz home arena. Many came in whole families to thank the person who gave them a sense of pride for their favorite team over 12 seasons. In social networks, thousands of fans shared memories of meetings with Mark, noting that he always found time for communication and never refused an autograph or joint photo.
What was especially touching was that most memories concerned his human qualities, respect for others, and amazing modesty, rather than his sports achievements. People talked about his humanity, respect for people around him, and amazing modesty. Even after finishing his career, he remained that same calm giant, loved not for loud words, but for actions. It seemed that an entire era of the Utah Jazz ended with Mark. But very little time passed, and it became obvious. His legacy cannot be measured only by records, awards, and statistics. The real reason why Mark Eaton's name continues to live in the memory of millions of people is much deeper than just the outstanding career of one of the best defenders in NBA history. Throughout his career, Mark Eaton did not win an NBA championship and rarely ended up in the center of loud headlines. His name was not associated with incredible scoring or spectacular attacking moments. But it is such players who often become the real foundation of great teams. While others collected ovations for beautiful shots, Eaton did the work, thanks to which the Utah Jazz remained one of the strongest clubs in the Western Conference year after year. His achievements speak for themselves. 2 NBA Defensive Player of the Year titles, 5 selections to defensive teams, 4 seasons as the league's leading block master, and over 3,000 blocks in his career. But even these impressive figures cannot fully convey his impact on the game. Mark's true value lay in the fact that he forced the entire league to look at the role of the center differently. He proved that one person is capable of changing the behavior of an entire opponent team. Many players admitted that when playing against the Utah Jazz, they changed their habitual manner of attacking the basket in advance. Eaton's mere presence in the 3-second zone forced them to look for more complex solutions and sometimes completely rebuild the match plan. The Utah Jazz never forgot their legendary defender either. In 2006, the club retired his number 53 jersey. For any basketball player, this is one of the highest forms of recognition. From that moment on, no one in the team's history will be able to take the court in a jersey with this number. Thus, the organization emphasized that Mark Eaton's imprint will forever remain part of its history. Yet, perhaps the most surprising fact in this story remains something else entirely, which many NBA fans still do not know. When Mark was already 21 years old, he was not considered a promising athlete at all. He repaired cars and was sure that this is what he would do all his life. At that time, many future stars of his generation were already in the center of attention of the best universities and preparing for a professional career. Eaton, meanwhile, was essentially starting from scratch. In just a few years, he managed to travel a path that seems almost impossible. From an ordinary car mechanic, he turned into one of the best defenders in NBA history. Not thanks to natural talent in attack, not thanks to loud promises, and not thanks to beautiful statistics, but thanks to discipline, patience, and daily work that few people saw. That is why Mark Eaton's story remains special even decades later. It reminds us that far from every great sports champion was a prodigy. Sometimes a person finds their true calling when those around them are already certain that all opportunities have long been lost. Today, he continues to be remembered not only as an outstanding center, but also as a person who kept modesty, respect for others, and loyalty to his club throughout his life. Perhaps that is why Utah Jazz fans still pronounce his name with special warmth. For them, Mark Eaton will forever remain not just a blocks record holder, but a person who proved greatness is determined not by how loudly people talk about you, but by what legacy you leave behind. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you are interested in real stories of great NBA players whose destinies were full of incredible ascents, heavy trials, and unexpected turns, be sure to watch other releases on our channel.
Right now, a few more videos will appear on the screen that will surely interest you.